1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sound check. Welcome to the Blood Red Podcast. We are live. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Blood Red Podcast with myself, Keifer MacDonald. Today I'm joined by a delighted Paul Gorst and a very, very, very happy Ian Doyle after Liverpool beat Manchester United 3-0 at Old Trafford yesterday afternoon. Before we get stuck into today's episode, just a shout out to our sponsors NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodredpodcast. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link can be found in the podcast and YouTube description box. Doyle, I'll start with you. A very, very good Sunday. Liverpool 3, Manchester United 0. I mean, where does that rank in terms of, the amount of trips you've been to Old Trafford? It's probably one of the better performances we've seen in the Premier League era. Liverpool don't win there a lot.
Well, I mean, I've seen them win 3-0 there in the past. I've seen them win 4-1. I've seen them win 5-0. So, when you look at it, that's all in the last 15 years. But it has to be up there. I mean, the difference with, say, for example, the 4-1, United were going for the title then. That was a very good United team, and Liverpool were also challenging for the title. I think when they won 3-0, that was the season when Moyes was there, and I don't think he lasted very long after that game.
No.
The 5-0... Obviously, that was kind of towards the end of Solskjaer. In fact, was it the end of Solskjaer?
Yeah, it was. Ollie's at the wheel was chanted a lot that day.
Yeah,
he lasted a
little bit.
Months,
yeah, he did go on for a little bit. And now we've got in a similar situation where Ten Hag is obviously not doing as well as he perhaps would expect, although given his press conference afterwards, he seems to think he's doing a great job, which is, we can get onto that a bit later on. But overall, I mean, in terms of just dominance, I think it wasn't actually that much different to the games back in March and April, where obviously Liverpool scored 3 in the FA Cup and 2 in the league, and managed to get knocked out of the FA Cup and only get a point in the league game. And I think the main difference between that and those games and yesterday is the fact that, well, for a start, Liverpool had the first choice defence available, which I know you mentioned that. I think you mentioned it on the podcast last Friday, didn't you? That they had so many missing when they were playing in March and April. But there we had, Robertson, Trent at the full-backs, Alisson and Ness, and Konate with Van Dijk, and all of them had good games. I thought Konate in particular was very good. Alisson made the saves when he needed to, although probably Xerxes should have done a bit better with that header. But even that was at 3-0. Liverpool had got the job done by then. And I think overall, in terms of the overall performance, as I say, United weren't that much different in terms of the level of quality, but I think Liverpool were very clever in the way that they played.
Yeah.
Slot was speaking after the game, wasn't he? He mentioned, we noticed this about United in their first 2 games, and we thought we might be able to do this. And it all worked perfectly because the players bought into it, and Liverpool had so many other better players available. In fact, with the exception of Curtis Jones, I think everybody was fit, weren't they? So, I mean, obviously Chiesa wasn't... he was registered, but he was never really going to be considered for this game. He was watching in the stands. So Liverpool's performance, you couldn't fault it in any way. I mean, that's 3 clean sheets. You win 3-0 at United. You've got 9 points from 9. It's been 129 years since a Liverpool manager won his first 3 league games. Even I wasn't alive for that.
Me too.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, it was just the way that they looked so comfortable. There's obviously been a little bit more control has been brought into Liverpool's game. And I know a lot of people saying, well, Liverpool never had that under Klopp. Well, actually, they did. It was when they were winning the stuff. And we've mentioned again on Friday, we talked about them. Last season was the start of a new team, and perhaps they got all caught up in the emotion of the last few months having all those injuries didn't help, for example. So it helped them in a way, but in the end it didn't help them. But Liverpool's performance, there's just nothing negative about it. There's nothing you could say that was bad about it. Even when the subs came on with the game won, they still managed to run around and contribute a little bit. So it was probably about as perfect as you could possibly get against a United team that, it's still in kind of transition, and they had that Manuel Ugarte they probably he unveiled it before the game, and they probably wanted to bring him on at half time, given how Casemiro had a bit of a nightmare. But he wasn't the only one, and part of the reason for that is Liverpool completely dominated the midfield, which is where, if you're going to win these games, that's where the games are always won and lost. Always, it's always the midfield, and Liverpool, that area is the one that people were worrying about, fretting about over the summer transfer window. And it's an area now where, again, we're only 3 games in. Interestingly, 2 of them have been away. Liverpool have straight away got into a way that they can improve on what Slot inherited from Jurgen Klopp.
And Gorst, just how were they able to kind of execute that plan? Because as Doyle says, last week and the whole summer, to be fair, was filled with noise about transfers and a lack of incomings. Obviously, they signed the goalkeeper from Valencia and Chiesa last week, but this was a squad that Jurgen Klopp had last year and only a few months ago, as Doyle says, when they played the 2 games in March and April. I mean, the performances were pretty chalk and cheese in terms of, yes, the quality was there. They scored 3 goals or 5 goals in Old Trafford in the space of a couple of weeks, but there was no real control that ever felt like at any point in those games.
Yeah, that was it, wasn't it? I think Doyle summed it up perfectly there in terms of it not being too much different. But there was a maturity about it. There was a control element that Liverpool didn't really have, throughout certain patches of both of those games. I think Virgil van Dijk said that after the game, that he said to them at half time, look, this time it doesn't slip. They went in obviously 2-0 up. They led in the FA Cup game twice, didn't they? And actually, 3-2 ahead in extra time, lose that game 4-3. The draw was massively damaging for the Premier League title bid at the time in April. But this was different in that Liverpool didn't really panic when the chances weren't going in. They didn't lose their heads, which is certainly what happened, in March and April when the Old Trafford crowd got up, and then Liverpool sort of become a little bit confused and didn't really know what to do. You'd imagine if Klopp's team last season would have scored after however long it was, and it was ruled out for offside in the way that Alexander-Arnold's goal was, with Salah being offside, that might have led to a good response from United, and Liverpool's sort of thinking, what do we do here? And they didn't really do that at all. It was really impressive how they just shrugged that off and just carried on playing the game and looked to get in behind the United midfield, which was just ridiculously easy at times. There was a pass that McAllister played to Szoboszlai in the first half. I think it was already 1-0 at the time, and it's only like 7 or 8 yards. I think on Frank Lampard's analysis on Match of the Day, I think it shows up on that, and the pass is still in Liverpool's half, and then Szoboszlai just turns and he's got acres of space and he's at United's back 4 without Liverpool having to do anything other than play a fairly routine pass, for 7 or 8 yards up the pitch. And it was just ridiculously easy for Liverpool to get in behind United, and that ultimately was the difference between the sides. And Casemiro's been getting pelters left and right, on social media. I've seen loads written about him today. But it wasn't just him, was it? For all the talk of Kobbie Mainoo being a special talent, I think teams overrun United's midfield very regularly with him in the team. Who else was in there? Bruno Fernandes, good player, but a bit of a flaky character at times when your backs are to the wall. And Liverpool exploited United's weaknesses perfectly, really. And the fact that it took us a few seconds, didn't it, to figure out who scored the opening goal.
We weren't the only ones.
They were queuing up at the back post to finish it off, and then Diaz developing that real clinical instinct for the second goal, and then Mo Salah doing what Mo Salah does again, with Liverpool sort of really charging towards that United back 4. After McAllister had muscled Kobbie Mainoo out of it. So yeah, almost like Doyle says, a perfect day for the team, and then the ability to rest and rotate for the final 15-20 minutes with Conor Bradley coming back in, and Salah went off, didn't he? Gakpo and Nunez coming on. So yeah, all in all, perfect day. And I think even the optimists wouldn't have predicted Liverpool going there and being as dominant. I mean, maybe they would have thought that it would have been a similar sort of domination, but I don't think many predicted Liverpool being as clinical as they were, because that was what ultimately undone them in March and April, and That certainly wasn't the case yesterday.
And certainly not passing it round on 57 minutes, getting Olays from the away end. I don't think anyone would have expected that, would they, before the game? But
there was a moment in the first half, I think Liverpool were 2-0 up, and Alexander-Arnold goes to hit it back to Alisson, sort of under-hits it. Alisson comes out of his goal and just leathers it clear. And that was a little bit of a moment of like, don't let these back into this at all.
Was that on Alisson scuffed the clearance kind of thing?
Possibly, yeah. It was just come on, 2-0 up here, keep your heads, get it to half time, get in there and don't give them a sniff. And that, other than that, United didn't really have anything.
No, absolutely. And Doyle, one person who really stepped up yesterday, I mean, ironically, a year on from signing for Liverpool was Gravenberch. I think, we can say that was his best performance by a country mile, wasn't it? I mean, he was just everywhere, and as Gorst says, bypass United's midfield, and when you look at Casemiro at the other end of the spectrum, it really does bode well for Liverpool, doesn't it? Especially after kind of all the noise that was, made in the summer about not signing Zubimendi.
Something happened very early on in the game where United played a long ball over the Liverpool midfield, and it went to Fernandes. Or how do we pronounce it? Fernandes. Yeah, I mean, it is his name, so we should probably pronounce it properly. But Gravenberch was like in the United half, right? And it was kind of that little reminder that he still doesn't really naturally work as a number 6. But after that, it never happened again. And it underlines that he's such a quick learner. I mean, Slot was asked about him after the game, and he said, because he doesn't speak English, perhaps, well, he certainly doesn't speak it as fluently as you do, possibly not more fluent than I do, given this answer. But he said that one of the things he likes about Gravenberch is that he always knew he was good with the ball. Says he didn't quite appreciate when he got to Liverpool, just saw him training, how good he is without the ball. And that's part of the reason why they wanted to try him as number 6. And the reason is that when he gets, because we've all played football to varying levels.
Low levels.
I never said they're any good. But it's one thing doing the race to try and challenge somebody. It's another thing to then get the ball off them. And then it's another thing to then straight away use it or know what to do. And he said that the main thing that he's really been impressed with him is the ability to get up to what they now call the duel, win the duel, and then use the ball straight away, because that takes a bit of effort. And it's not just him that's able to do it. You look at McAllister's very good at doing that. Szoboszlai is very good at doing it. And I think just generally what I think's been interesting is that they didn't sub any of the midfielders against United, did they? They did the two forwards and two fullbacks. Now, you could argue under Jurgen Klopp, possibly one of the midfielders might have gone off because they'd have been tired. But they didn't have to do as much running around because the ball always does more running. And also there's been a change in the setup, which we spoke about with the 2 deeper line ones, which has offered a bit more protection for the midfield. But you saw in the first half, Gravenberch, when he would get up, and I'm right in saying the disallowed goal came from him nicking the ball off Casemiro.
He played it out.
No, he was the pass from a thingy, wasn't it? Van Dijk.
So Van Dijk feeds it
that's
into
right.
him,
That's that. It was was it the first goal that
he snuffed out the pass, didn't he, to Mainu?
Intercepted, doesn't he?
That's right. So there were 2 examples of him playing beyond the halfway line, pretty high, and then there's a number of times where Liverpool pressed, and he was quite high up there, but he did it at the right times. And the point I was making earlier is that very early on he was still trying to find his bearings, but he appears to be a very quick learner, because it's one thing doing it against Ipswich in the second half and doing it throughout against Brentford, but it's quite another to go to Old Trafford and do that. And I know United aren't the best United team there's ever been, and we mentioned that the midfield, while they've got good players in there, it just doesn't seem to function as well as it should. And it's on days like that you see that Kobbie Mainoo, he's still a young player, and he's got an awful lot to learn. But Gravenberch has been, he got brought through at Ajax. He made his debut at Ajax at 16, had a season at Bayern Munich where it didn't go so well. He's already had a year at Liverpool, and he's played in an international tournament. Actually, he didn't get any minutes, but the point is he went. He's got a lot of experience for a player. He's still only 22, and you can kind of now see that while people at the time, including myself, thought Gravenberch can't possibly be a number 6, because when you saw him last season, the one thing that I was always concerned about was his decision making. Like, sometimes he tried too much, and you go, well, he's lost it there. Why has he done that? And you can't afford to do that. But maybe that's helped him. He knows quite well he can't afford to do it, and it's like, right, I know exactly what I have to do here. I can't do that risky stuff, but you can kind of see, you certainly saw it against Brentford, there were one or two touches where you thought, I can go and get this ball, and he knows he can do it. And that goes back to what Slot said about getting to the duel first and then doing something with it. So Liverpool are making the tackles, making the interceptions, and moving the ball quickly. And they're able to do that from this position, this foundation of the two of them being bad there. And again, I think it was Frank Lampard in his match of the day analysis said, watch this, the three of them kind of rotating around. They're always quite close. They know when to go. My only concern, got to be the concern, and it's not my only concern, it's what Slot said it twice on Sunday, said in his press conference. I think he said it somewhere else as well. He says, look, we've been playing one game a week, and we can play this mid. He didn't say this bit, but the inference is, I haven't had to change the team. We can play this midfield. It's great. Nobody's injured. But when they will start rotating, the minute they come back, everybody's going away for international break. They will have to rotate because they're playing 2 games a week then for the next 4 weeks, and they'll be doing it again the following month after that, in between the October and November international break. And then after that, it's Christmas, and you can see. Yeah. And then in January, you've got the Champions League, 2 extra games, and it's just going to go on and on like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when some of the other players come in.
But I suppose that fits into the whole approach of Slot, is that, the fact that he was able to even give some of the players 20 minutes rest yesterday, you typically wouldn't have seen it under Klopp because, the games might have been more end-to-end. Players are given more on it.
But then they didn't bring off the midfielders, which is what I was saying, is that they've not really had
he could have,
chance.
Is probably the point. He could have as well.
They haven't really had the chance to kind of play. And, I think he would still have been playing Gravenberch as a number 6 this season, even if they'd have signed Zubimendi, clearly, because he clearly got that in his head, as he could be a position that he could rotate the pair of them in.
Yeah, I think when he signed, speaking to people, that seemed to be a bit of a plan to almost turn him into a number 6, because they felt that he had the athletic ability to get about the pitch. He obviously, his quality on the ball, schooled at the Ajax Academy and all that sort of stuff, but for whatever reason, it just never quite worked out. The plans, football happened around the plans, and injuries happened, and the game started picking up, and Liverpool just never really got the chance to play him in that position. So Slot's come in and done something which Jurgen Klopp always intended to do by all accounts, and just never really got around to doing it. So so far so good. The big thing was with Gravenberch is he's done well against Ipswich, he's done well against Brentford, but Old Trafford's a different kettle of fish, and he's passed it with flying colours. And again, you can sort of make that caveat again that there'll be tougher tests ahead because United aren't a great United team, but I think on the evidence so far he's been absolutely superb, and to be fair, so McAllister and Szoboszlai in there as well. So like Doyle says, when the fixtures start picking up, there will be more need to use the squad, the likes of Elliott, Curtis Jones when he's back, Endo if needed. But so far it's as you were, and it's a very settled team. It's a winning team, and the thing that's impressed me the most is the fact that they're not even really conceding chances. Obviously, you haven't conceded a goal, but don't even look like giving up chances, and that certainly wasn't a thing last season, was it? I can think of loads of times when even games Liverpool won when the opposition would have big chances and big moments.
Late winners and...
Yeah, conceding early was obviously the big issue, wasn't it? But so far, that hasn't been a problem.
I was in an interview with Andy Robertson before the game, and one thing that he said was quite interesting. He said he was asked about the differences between Slot and Klopp, and he said, look, he says obviously Klopp's a great communicator, but Slot does it in a very different way. He does like to communicate, but his attention to detail when it comes to tactics is incredible, which I thought was quite interesting given the fact he's only been there a matter of weeks for some of these players. And you could kind of see that at United. They didn't play the same way that they played against Brentford and Ipswich. In fact, I'm right in saying, didn't United have more possession? I don't know for sure. At one point, that I was surprised when I saw it that during the game, I think United had 55% and Liverpool had 45%, but it seemed as though Liverpool had loads of the ball.
53 to United.
Yeah, 50%. Yeah. So, but that's to do with where you've got the ball. You don't have to do all this passing around the back, which is what Liverpool... Okay, maybe they did a little bit when it went to 3-0 because, again, they did change the way that they play because they were like, we're 3-0 up here. We don't have to go for it. And, United did have... I know Liverpool didn't give away many chances, but United had, well, I'd say 2 chances. There was the one header from Xerxes, and then his little kind of... at the far post where he was stretching for it, which would have been a good finish. Like, that is kind of a chance. His shot where he curls from the edge of the area, that's just a shot. I think any keeper should be thinking of saving that. They're the only real kind of efforts that they had, and Liverpool just kept them at arm's length. And I think that Liverpool already are able to play in a number of different ways inside a game as well, which is what every team does that, and every team should be able to do that. But Liverpool have done it with a new manager straight away. It kind of just help in a way that they haven't made loads of signings in the summer, and while we all would have liked to have seen certainly Zubimendi come in, possibly, I don't know, Chiesa has not been tried out yet because he's only just signed. If you got the continuity of the squad who all know how to play together, and somebody says, right, we're going to change this a little bit, can you do this? They know what everybody's capable of doing. Probably more so than even the manager does at this point. So I think that helps them, and these players have been around for a while. These are very top quality players. They're all international players. A lot of them have won stuff with Liverpool. In fact, I think all of them won stuff with Liverpool now. So, they know what they're doing.
Feels like they've got a really nice blend of youth and experience in those kind of middle ages as well.
But which they didn't have for a while. But it's just interesting, isn't it, that the fees, and again, I think, as we said before, this might change in September when they start getting players injured and having to rotate people around. But it's kind of just allayed any of the worries that people had for them not bringing in a load of players.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and Gorst, it's only 3 points at the end of the day, but it's kind of hard to quantify what that'll do for Slot so early in his reign.
Yeah.
I mean, you heard the chants at the end of the game yesterday from the away end. Slot even gave them a little thumbs up. I mean, he was very kind of understated in his interviews and kind of cool and composed, but underneath all that, I'm sure he'll be buzzing, won't he?
Yeah, it was a psychological thing as well, wasn't it? Because there was a barrier there, certainly from last season when Liverpool went there and absolutely battered United. 60 shots across the 2 games, something like that, and obviously didn't win either of them. And Slot got asked about that on Friday. I think someone said for some supporters the emotional scars are still there from those games, and he just sort of took it in that typical sort of no nonsense style that he has that we've already seen. He just said, well, essentially it wasn't us going there; it was a different team, a different time. So he smashed that one out the park yesterday, didn't he? And I think it's really exciting actually now because, it's been a very good start, but there will be tougher tests ahead. The games will pick up and stuff like that. But as of opening 3 games, genuinely couldn't have gone any better, could it? So, really excited to see what happens now in the other big games where sometimes there was a little bit of a psychological thing there for Liverpool. Certainly thinking of Goodison Park, for example. We know Liverpool are a better squad than Everton, but at times that was a great equaliser, wasn't it, when Liverpool went there? And last season they capitulated, was April time. So games like that, seeing how we sort of navigated yesterday, I think that should excite Liverpool fans going forward.
That's an interesting point because Liverpool are going to play way better teams than Man United. You look up Brighton, Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle, Tottenham, Chelsea, Villa.
You know what I mean?
It's like there's a lot of teams who are better than Man United, certainly at football, and then you've got other teams who've got to come and just play for a point. Like Everton will do that. Everton will do that when they come to Anfield.
Which is their prerogative, obviously.
Well, exactly, yeah, that's fine. But it's just different challenges. I don't necessarily think Brentford, if they did try to do it, they hit it very well. And Ipswich certainly didn't try to do that. But what Liverpool did at Ipswich and at United was drain the emotion from the game. And that's the point that Gorst is making, and that is interesting. That's what Liverpool can do with, because they've got the characters in the team, but also with the way that they're playing. Clearly, that's a way that Slot wants them to play. He wants. We've mentioned about control, and it's all very well talking about it, but you've seen that control doesn't necessarily mean having all the ball. It doesn't mean just sitting back. It just means doing things in a certain manner and scoring at certain times.
And at the same time, it's not 100 passes. I think people, when he came in, thought it'd be this, not Guardiola style of play, but, when you hear possession base, you think 100 passes for the sake of passes.
They've only played 3 games.
But so I'm saying you've still seen those flashes of the kind of the Klopp counter-attacks that we saw the goal against Brentford, and even yesterday there was a few on the break, wasn't there?
But why wouldn't you? If you've got all that players.
It meshes all the sort of styles, doesn't it? And that's a good point you make about taking the emotion out of the games, because that was Liverpool's superpower for years, wasn't it? And helped them in so many games, but at times it didn't need to be as emotional as it was. I'm certainly thinking of games like Luton Town and Sheffield United at Anfield last season. 2 of the best sort of atmospheres and games of the season, but didn't really need to be, given the quality of the opponents. And I think if they can sort of pick and choose when to have that emotional sort of thing that underpins them and powers them, I think that'll be an important Arsenal it's an important weapon in their arsenal to have alongside being a bit more controlled and measured at times. And so far, so good.
I think neutrals watching the game on Sunday would probably been thinking, this is a bit boring. And I think Liverpool need a bit of that. I think they'd have watched it and gone,
well, we said the same about City, don't we?
Yeah, you just said,
yeah.
Liverpool, these look quite good. And United, these don't look very good. And I think if Liverpool play the way they do and they kind of expose... If Liverpool can expose what the other team is, whether that be they're a good team, they're a bad team, that's the most you can ask for from... That's the very least, you can ask for from a top club. I think that's what happens when big teams play, is that they kind of show what the other team is.
Yeah, and Gorst, just before we get on to Mo Salah and some other bits from yesterday's game, it's been obviously actually both, but it's been a month obviously of the kind of the Slot reign officially, but began in June. But the new season, what have you kind of made of it then? 3 games in, as I say, different tests, home and away. Obviously the big game yesterday. How would you kind of sum it up? The man as well. What have you made of him?
Yeah, I mean he's a very different character to Jurgen Klopp. I think we sort of realised that very early on, and you could ask Klopp one thing and he gives you 2.5 minutes on it and takes you through a little bit of an emotional roller coaster across the course of the answer. But Slot's very different, and he's being himself. He's being authentic, he's being natural, and this is him. It's not going to give you the same sort of blockbuster lines as journalists, which we hope for and we like to cover. But as a sort of tactician and a coach, he's really already shone through as someone who's very studious and very sort of attentive to the detail. The style, he's sort of spoken about how it's not too much of a departure from Klopp, but I think already we've seen that there is really, he will like to keep the sort of lightning counter-attacks and the transitions from front to back, but in possession it's very different. It's a lot more safe, not conceding many chances, and can't fault it so far. It's been 3 wins, 3 games, 3 wins. 7 goals scored, 0 conceded, and a statement performance yesterday at Old Trafford. So yeah, been brilliant.
One thing that he was quite keen to pick up on after the game, in fact, I think he said it 3 times in his press conference, is that the work rate of the players. And I think under Klopp you couldn't argue with that. And all the best teams, look at Man City, they don't have to work hard. But compare that to United yesterday, where some of their players it's just little drop-offs, isn't it? And I'm not referring to Casemiro, who's about 1,000 years old.
32.
Yeah, he's only 32.
Yeah.
Well, clearly playing for Real Madrid properly ages you. But I do think that they had 1 or 2 players who, that's the difference. I know their heads possibly went down at 2-0 and 3-0, but at least one of those goals, they could have made a bit more of an effort to, try and stop it from happening if 1 or 2 of the players put in a little bit more of an effort. And you see that's what happens when you don't. And Slot said, he was speaking to Sky after the game, wasn't he, where he mentioned about he had to have a word with Luis Diaz and remind him that you need to come back and track back, because look what happened when you didn't, and that's when United had their 1 shot on target in the first half.
I also thought it was quite interesting that Salah obviously said many things in his post-match interview, but one kind of little nugget he said was that they kind of had the same voice under Jurgen Klopp for 7 or 8 years, and it just goes to show that it isn't always that the blueprint has to be ripped up. It can just be the thing of a new voice is as good as fresh ideas, isn't it? Kind of thing.
I mean that's one of the things that probably helped Alex Ferguson over the years, wasn't it? He was obviously there for the best part of 3 decades, but he kept changing his assistants over the years, didn't he? Carlos Queiroz, Steve McLaren. So there was Mike Phelan, loads of others across his time there, and that just leads to different voices on the training pitch day to day. But I think Slot absolutely loves coaching. He loves rolling the sleeves up and getting on the pitch, and that's where he sort of earns his corn. I think in terms of asking him about transfer stuff and particularly the contract stuff, I think he just sort of tries to stay out of it all, and it's above him, and he's going to continue to get sort of bombarded with those sorts of questions, but I think he's not going to change his answers, because ultimately he is the head coach as opposed to the sort of all-seeing oracle that Klopp had come to be by the end of it. He was dealing with everything, wasn't he? So I think on the training pitch is where Slot really loves to get to work, and I think we're seeing that in the performances that Liverpool are putting in.
Absolutely, and Doyle, it wouldn't be a Blood Red podcast if I wasn't asking you about Mo Salah and his contract. Yesterday, I mean, kind of the message that he sent out, it felt like maybe it was a bit misunderstood. I mean, he kind of was stating the obvious that he is out of contract, and as it stands, this will be his last Premier League game at Old Trafford for Liverpool. Do you think that was a clever move from Salah, maybe putting a bit of pressure on the club after a great performance?
It was exactly the same as what he said before the game. So it's like, what is the news cycle here for us journalists? It's like, everyone forgot what he said 3 days earlier? So I know we have 24-hour news channels, sports news channels and everything, but come on. So people just seem surprised that he'd said it. It's like, well, yeah, he's just stating the obvious. What you might say is what you've just said, is he putting a little bit on the club? And it's not just him, is it? There's obviously Van Dijk and Trent, who are both out of contract at the end of the season. And I wrote something saying, look, transfer window's over. They got through the first games, new managers in, sporting directors in now. There's no excuse to not start looking at these 3 contracts now properly and going, right, we're not giving you one. Right, you can have this. All right, we'd like you to have this. And I'm sure we could all have our own guesses as to what we think might happen or what we want to happen. But the way things have gone now, I think it's more now on the player in terms of the powers with the player. Obviously, we don't have to sign but also it's more in their court than the club's now, I think, because the club, for whatever reason, it was said before, it was a bit of a hospital pass for Richard Hughes, wasn't it, that he was given this, sign all these players, move these on, oh, by the way, there's these 3 contracts, you need to sort this out. So he's had to go through more one by one. I mean, we don't know exactly what's been going on behind the scenes, but we can only go off what the 3 of them have been saying and the noises they've been making. And we said it in the podcast on Friday that all 3 of them seem to have not been offered an official deal yet. So I would be amazed.
Well, Van Dijk and
Van Dijk
and Salah definitely
said it. Yeah, I would be amazed if they haven't all started talks by this time next month, because if they haven't, then it's like, well, clearly the club don't want any of these players to stay. Will be the message that an awful lot of people, including me, and including the pair of you, would I'm assuming, would you? Would you agree with saying that's what it seems like?
Yeah, I mean, you start to wonder what is the hold up.
Exactly.
Especially
what
with
else
that.
is on
it's one thing to say they've agreed a contract, but they have to have started some kind of negotiations or reached out to representatives or said, look, this is ideally what we want. What do you want? Because say, for example, argument's sake, devil's advocate, they go, Trent, right, do you want a 4-year contract? And he says, no, I'm leaving. And no matter what they say, he says he's leaving. Then it's like, well, fine. Whereas you could say with the others, you go, Mo, here's a 12-month contract. Do you want to sign it? Then he's got something to think about. So they are the discussions they have to start inside the next. They simply have to. And if they don't, then clearly the message, for me anyway, is that we're not going forward with, I think, is Van Dijk 32 or 33 now?
So Van Dijk's 33 now, and Salah's
32, and Trent's 25 or 26?
25,
25. So we're going forward next season without these 3 players.
Certainly, and especially as that January the 1st kind of, the transfer window opens, it means they can sign pre-contract agreements and open talks with other clubs overseas. So that just kind of opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it, at that stage of the season?
It does, yeah. I mean, it seems Van Dijk is probably the one that you're least concerned about. Salah seems to be very relaxed about it all, and Trent is the one that you'd be slightly worried about now, I think, because there's no doubt that Real Madrid would be sniffing around. They've just taken Kylian Mbappe on a free, so there'd be nothing to stop them thinking they can't get Trent Alexander-Arnold on a free. He's determined not to have this issue sort of played out in public. That's been the sort of information that we've had from a few people now over the last couple of months. And that's all fair enough. Obviously, it's Boyle Club. Very delicate situation. Doesn't want to be seen to be disrespectful or, certain people suggesting things to the media that might come out or whatever else. So I think that's all fine. But at some stage, you'd like to see a little bit of movement and some resolution at some stage. We know these things tend to happen quite fast, but I'm with Doyle. I'd be amazed if Richard Hughes isn't now tasked with resolving those 3 at the top of his to-do list. I look at things sort of in isolation and you wonder why prioritising a goalkeeper for next summer has seemed to really have taken precedence over bringing in a number 6 or sorting the contracts of these players, and it seemed like that should have been like quite far down the to-do list on the Richard Hughes' in tray. But now with the transfer window shut, they've got no more issues to resolve around that until January. So, what can you do as a sporting director? You can sort of plan longer, wider strategy for the club in terms of best practices or whatever, I don't know. But those contract issues aren't going away, are they? And the longer it goes on, the more twitchy fans will get, and understandably so. So let's hopefully see some movement for at least one of them in the next couple of weeks or months.
This isn't the same as like Adrian last year and before that, Milner and Firmino, who were kind of hanging around going, well, we're going to get offered a contract here or not, because none of those are regular starters. These are 3 key players for Liverpool. Captain, vice-captain, best player. So this has to get sorted as soon as possible. And I think everybody has to be kind of grown up about it. If they come out and say, I am leaving at the end of the season for whatever reason, say for example Salah goes, I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia, if they all agree we're going to say this now, because there's been no suggestion from any of the 3 players, in fact the fact that they've all had really good starts to the season, that they're being distracted by it. And my belief is that the longer this goes on, the more chance there is that they'll be distracted. Just the way it is.
Yeah,
I think people might be a bit upset if one of them says, I'm leaving at the end of the season. But I think they'll get over it pretty soon, especially if the team keeps on winning and they're still doing, they're still playing really well. I think that serves the best interests of everybody. So as long as it doesn't go on for too long, people reach decisions as soon as they can. The other thing is these players are under no obligation to come up with decisions as soon as possible. They can basically, the power I said before is with them. They can do what they like, really. But my personal view is, if you know you're going to go, just let everybody know. If you want to stay, the club needs to get a move on and offer contracts.
Yeah, I spoke to John Aldridge as part of his Echo column earlier this morning, and he come up with a great line. He said the club and FSG are looking to play poker with 3 players who've all got royal flushes, and that was a great way of summing it up, I think. Salah is an interesting one because he's the highest paid player at the club, the highest paid player of all time, but he's going to be 33 by the time that next season starts. So are they concerned about him dropping off? Is there going to be are they worried that his performances are going to completely fall off a cliff? That is a fair assessment to make for a player who is of his age, but I think Salah's a bit of a special case, a bit of a unique player who keeps himself in such good nick, such dedication to improvement and to fitness and recovery and all that sort of stuff, that he could probably play close to his 40s.
I mean, Jamie Carragher said the same.
Just about to say, yeah, Carragher said something along those lines yesterday. And players are playing, top players are playing longer these days. It's not like it was maybe 15, 20, 25 years ago where players started looking at calling time when they got to 32, 33. I think that they're fitter than ever. They're keeping themselves in better nick during the summer months. And look at Salah's decision over the summer to swear playing in the Olympics with Egypt for a good, solid pre-season under Slot. And, we're only 3 games in, but it's already looked to have paid off handsomely. And I think he's still got a good 2, 3, maybe even 4 years at this level. And, if he has, for those not to be spent at Liverpool would be a massive disappointment, I think.
But I think the club,
to say the least.
So I think the club are going to have to accept the fact they're never going to get a fee for Salah now. That's gone, right? If he does sign a contract, I'd be amazed if it's anything more than 12 months. And I think.
Do you think they'd do a 2-year?
No, I think if they do 12 months, I think that serves the interest of everybody, because if he does start to have a drop off, then Liverpool aren't paying him for too long when he's kind of losing his way, and it still gives Salah that option at the end of the season to go, well, yeah, I fancy going now, and Liverpool get another season out of him. They're not going to get a fee for him now, as far as I'm concerned.
But with Salah, I mean, you look around and there's every team in Europe would take Salah. His performance yesterday was incredible, but it feels like there isn't a market for him. I mean, Saudi Arabia, it feels like that's been and gone.
Yeah, no, I think Saudi Arabia hasn't been and gone. I think that's where he'll end up.
But I just think in the way he's playing, we know how hungry he is for success. The kind of the model professional he is. I just can't see him at 32, 33 going and saying, I'm going to play in this bit part, NAF League. I understand the kind of cultural aspect of it. Then, okay, maybe a few years ago you might have had Real Madrid knocking in. Obviously just signed Kylian Mbappe, that rules out. PSG, another one who've maybe been linked in the past, they've kind of gone away from that Galactico, paying big money for star players. They've kind of gone for a more cohesive approach. So it's kind of
Barcelona haven't got any money.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of, as you go, down the list, he's not going to go and sign for City, is he?
The options are few for them, aren't they? To be fair, and that was one of the things that he sort of privately communicated when his contract was coming up a couple of years ago was that he had no intention of signing for another English club. So once you rule that out, if that still is the case,
it feels like it's Liverpool or Saudi Arabia, really.
Well, don't forget, there's also a bit of a sense of, with all three of these players going, let's see what this new manager's like. And I think sometimes people forget that. And given the fact they've all started so well and the team started so well, and obviously the caveats that we've mentioned already in this podcast is that perhaps another month and then they see how they start in the Champions League and they see how it go when they start rotating players, gives them a better idea. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. But certainly Salah, to what do you think, to a lesser extent Van Dijk, and I think it probably does count for Trent as well, actually.
Yeah, I think Liverpool's issue is, having to maybe even increase Salah's wage for a player who's at the age he is. But I mean, they've lost some high earners in the last year or so, haven't they? Firmino was big, Henderson obviously, Thiago was up there with Van Dijk, sort of just below Salah. So the wage bill shouldn't really be too much of an issue. So I don't think they can really hide behind that as maybe an excuse for not offering three of the best players extensions, because the money theoretically at least should be there.
And I suppose with a contract, people will say, well, Salah's proved it, but in Liverpool they'll be saying we're paying for what we're going to get over the next 2 years rather than what's just happened over the last three.
Yeah.
But
which is why you gave him a 1 year contract.
Well, exactly. And I suppose, if they could do a similar kind of thing what they did before, where it's kind of heavily incentivised, and they say, look, if you think you're going to perform, you'll get the money you deserve, kind of thing.
I think if you're going to incentivise it with Salah, it'd probably be based on not so much goals. I always hate it when it's based on goals, because then you leave it open for appearances and team trophies and success. I think is what I'd want anything incentivised.
Tell you what, if you're getting a clean sheet bonus at Liverpool, though, you've earned a few ball, haven't you, this season?
Be a nice international break for a few of those. But as you say, Van Dijk feels like a contract that might it feels like I think you said Gorst, one that hopefully you'll sort yourself out. It feels like the most kind of straightforward one to do.
It does, yeah, but on the flip side, you wouldn't want to overly neglect that too much. He is the club captain after all. Every club in Europe would want him lining up as their centre-back as well. So, yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of plates spinning here, and it's difficult to not take your eye off one, isn't it, with the other one still there. So, yeah, loads of work to do for Richard Hughes and or Michael Edwards in the next, days, weeks, hours. They need to get on it sooner or later.
It won't be.
But if you look at the way Liverpool have worked under FSG, who was it? Emre Can, Wijnaldum, Thiago, Milner, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Firmino, Matip. They've just let them go down to the end of the contracts because they've gone, well, you've done really well for us. We've got everything we want out of you. Bye, kind of thing.
No,
but I think the three players who are there, even with the caveats of someone like Firmino and still had a lot to give, I think these three are in a different sort of sphere to the players we just mentioned.
They don't have some resale value. I mean, I know you say that Liverpool won't get a fee for Salah if they were to do a 12 months, but it feels like even with Van Dijk, if he was to get a couple of years, even in a year, he feels like you could recoup some money back, doesn't it? Trent, obviously, if you were to give him a 5-year deal and in 2 years he wanted to go, you'd obviously get a huge fee for him. So it feels like, whereas those players that you said before, Firmino, as you say, it's probably the right time for him to leave, wasn't it? Emre Can is a difficult one. Wijnaldum, again, a bit of a weird one, but it feels like even if they didn't fulfil their contracts at Liverpool, their value would be protected somewhat, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not so much with Van Dijk because he'll be 34 only by the start of next season. But again, that goes back to keeping themselves in top nick and defenders, particularly if they're not expending too much energy, which Liverpool's style at the moment is helpful towards that. Means that he can play, another couple of years at least. He's looked good this season.
Absolutely. Well, the transfer window might have closed, but it certainly won't be a quiet international break at Liverpool, I wouldn't suspect. And just to finish off today's podcast, Doyle, I'll throw this one over to you first. NordVPN's player, is it, or person of the week? Is it person of the week?
Yeah.
You said Casemiro, didn't you?
I said Casemiro.
Somewhat
yeah. No, who should we give it to? Did we give it to last week? Can't remember. Did we give it to? I want to give it to Diaz. No,
Diaz,
I've changed my mind. I'm going to give it to Gravenberch. No, we gave it to Gravenberch last week, didn't we?
Has he won it twice in a row, has he?
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I think... Have we give it to?
Start keeping an official record of this.
Yeah,
It's almost like it's not a real.
I don't
a
think
real
Diaz
award.
has. I know. Yeah, don't think Diaz got one. So I think I'm going to give it to Diaz.
Diaz is a shout. Yeah, I mean, I just liked the clinical nature of him yesterday, where he pops up with that header, doesn't he? You know, I'm making this man, even though Szoboszlai's going for it as well. And then that finish for the second goal was really well taken. And at a time when he's having these sort of lack of end product critiques thrown at him, I think he started the season really well and actually won Match of the Day's goal of the month yesterday. So let's give it to Luis Diaz in it. Yeah,
I hadn't got that far into it.
and yeah, he won goal of the month.
It does feel like Diaz has come out with a bit of a point to prove this year, doesn't it? It feels like it's quite a big season for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, Liverpool, make no bones about it, they really admire Anthony Gordon. We're in talks to bring him in, and then that would have been a real question over who starts on the left side. Will it be the younger player or the one who's younger new signing or the one who's currently there? So yeah, he started well. I think he had a good Copa America as well, and he's come back and he's just sort of carried that on. I thought he was really good in the friendly against Sevilla and has continued that into the competitive stuff and looks in really good nick.
And Doyle, are you in agreement with Diaz as the NordVPN player of the week, person of the week?
Well, I've already suggested it, so yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
Do you remember that bit? Just like about 30 seconds earlier.
you look disinterested, so I thought I'd just bring you back to reality.
I was actually looking at the comments, and you know, we've had not quite as many as we had the other day, but there's been one or two people who are still a little bit angry about the transfer.
Someone said Liverpool are cheap, and on that note, that's the end of today's episode. So thanks for listening. If you are listening on Spotify and on YouTube, the NordVPN discount will be in the description box, and do subscribe. And as Joe says, is it ring the bell, tap the bell, push the bell?
Press the bell.
Press the bell.
Give us 5 stars and all that stuff.
But don't give us and lower them 4 because 3 is just mean.
Absolutely. Well, I've been Keifer MacDonald, Paul Gorst, and Ian Doyle. Thank
You've
you
been
for joining
all
us.
3 of us.
I have.